Saul goes to consult a medium. He didn't hear from God, so he goes to consult a medium. And the Philistines now reject David. They couldn't trust him. Saul and his sons died. Let's find out more details as we read along in 1 Samuel from chapter 28 to 31. In 1 Samuel chapter 28, Saul consults a medium. From verse 1 it says, about that time the Philistines mustered their armies for another war with Israel. King Achish told David, you and your men will be expected to join me in battle. Very well, David agreed. Now you will see for yourself what we can do. Then Achish told David, I will make you my personal bodyguard for life. What? This king of the Philistines trusted David so much. Like he really he was so confident and so what's the word now? He believed so much in David. He loved David. He was, he was so confident in David's abilities that he wanted to make him his personal bodyguard. I mean, you left every other person in the Philistine army is David. You're choosing. Just that just shows, how valiant of a soldier David was and how valuable he was, and this is why he was able to get special covering in the Philistines camp from as a protection, special protection from Saul in the enemy camp. David was the best in the land, even among the Philistine army, that the king wanted to make him his own personal bodyguard. In verse 5, when Saul saw the vast army, he became frantic with fear. He asked the Lord what he should do, but the Lord refused to answer, either by dreams or by sacred laws or by the prophets. This is a very terrible place to be. When you're praying and you're not hearing God, it seems like you're all by yourself. We never want to lose the presence of God. We must do everything to protect our fellowship, our fellowship with God. We never want to lose it. So, from preceding chapters, we see that Saul had lost all regard for God. He was actually chasing David in an attempt to kill David and remain on the throne because he knew God had rejected him and he had chosen David in his stead. And instead of going to God for mercy, he rather wanted to take things in his own hands. And now he's in trouble and calling to God, and God is not answering him because, God is not an object to be used. He's a father. He's a living God. He wants fellowship. He wants relationship. So Saul only sought God because he was in trouble. Now, because he was afraid, he was looking for God. And of course, he didn't get a response. In verse 7, Saul then said to his advisors, find a woman who is a medium so I can go ask her what to do. All he cared was, I just need to know what to do. He didn't care about his relationship with God. And this is so critical that we don't go to God for what we can get from him, but we go to him for fellowship. That we build fellowship, we build communion with God. It's not about give me. It's about fellowshipping, relationship with God. And the Bible says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these other things will be added. So Saul didn't care whether it was a Lord or a medium, he just needed answers, right? He didn't care where it came from. And God was able to see through his heart. That's why he couldn't hear from God, because God knew he was only there for what he could get. In verse 8, so Saul disguised himself by wearing ordinary clothing instead of his royal robes. Then he went to the woman's home at night, accompanied by 2 of his men. I have to talk to a man who has died, he said. Will you call up his spirit for me? In verse 11, finally the woman said, well, whose spirit do you want me to call up? Call up Samuel, Saul replied. And then in verse 15, Samuel asked Saul, why have you disturbed me by calling me back? Because I am in deep trouble, Saul said. The Philistines are at war with me, and God has left me and won't reply me by prophet or by dreams. So I've called you to tell me what to do. Saul was a very selfish man. He didn't care who he disturbed or what protocol he broke. He just needed an answer by all means, any means possible. And it's such a terrible thing when God leaves a man. We must guard, our fellowship, our hunger, our relationship with God, with everything we have. In 17, the Lord has done just as he said he would. He has torn the kingdom from you and given it to your rival, David. The Lord has done this to you today because you refused to carry out his fierce anger against the Amalekites. What's more, the Lord will hand you and the army of Israel over to the Philistines tomorrow, and you and your sons will be here with me. The Lord will bring down the entire army of Israel in defeat. Yeah, that's a chilling realization to think and to actually know he was going to be dead, and he and his sons were going to be dead by the following day. That's a terrible, a very terrible place to be, you know. So Saul fell full length on the ground, paralyzed with fear, fright, because of Samuel's words. He was also faint with hunger, for he had not eaten all day and all night. Yeah, really sad, really sad. And to think that this was the same person God had handpicked to be king over the Israelites. But he became king, and he forgot about God. He had no regard for God. And yeah, let's read on and see how this plays out for him. In chapter 29 of 1 Samuel, from verse 1, the entire Philistine army now mobilized at Aphek, and the Israelites camped at the spring in Jezreel. As the Philistine rulers were leading out their troops in groups of hundreds and thousands, David and his men marched at the rear with King Achish. But the Philistine commanders demanded, "What are these Hebrews doing here? Like, are you being serious right now?" And Achish told them, "This is David, the servant of King Saul of Israel. He's been with me for years, and I've never found a single fault with him from the day he arrived until today." They didn't know David had been going behind his back to attack some of the Philistine territory. Anyways, but the Philistine commanders were angry. "Send him back to the town you've given him." Like, is it not bad enough to give him a town, you know, in the country? Like, please just send him back to that town that you gave him, Yeah. We're not even making an issue of that. Just let him go back to that town you've already given him. He can't go into battle with us. What if he turns against us in battle and becomes our adversary? Is there any better way for him to reconcile himself with his master than by handing over our heads to him? Isn't this the same David about whom the women of Israel sang in their dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David is 10,000. So Achish finally summoned David and said to him, "I swear by the Lord that you have been a trustworthy ally. I think you should go with me into battle, for I've never found a single flaw in you from the day you arrived until today." But the other Philistine rulers won't hear of it. "Please don't be upset. Please don't upset them, but go back quietly." So David and his men headed back into the land of the Philistines, while the Philistine army went on to Jezreel. Yeah, there's absolutely no way David would have fought against his own people, the Israelites, right? I don't know what this king was. He was just so trustworthy, so trusting of David. I believe David would have turned on them to actually fight against them during the war. So yeah, the king was blinded, obviously. That's why, leaders can easily get blinded. It's good, it's great when they have great people around them, great advisors around them, who can help them see beyond their blind spots. This king obviously had a blind spot for David, and he loved him, and he was, really intrigued by him, and he couldn't see any wrong in him. As far as he was concerned, he was so glad to have David on his side. He wanted to even make him his bodyguard. That's how much he trusted David. Wow. Whew. Yeah, who knows how that would have played out anyway. Um, yeah, I definitely think David would have fought for the Israelites. Yeah, because this was a very strategic and critical battle. We'll find out what happens in this battle because, yeah, in this battle, Saul and his best friend, his covenant brother, Jonathan, ended up being killed in that battle. So, yeah, I believe David would have fought for the Israelites against the Philistines. But let's read on. In 1 Samuel chapter 30, from verse 1. 3 days later, when David and his men arrived home at their town of Ziklag, they found that the Amalekites had made a raid into the Negev and Ziklag. They had crushed Ziklag, that was the town David was living with his men, and burned it to the ground. They had carried off the women and children and everyone else, but without killing anyone. When David and his men saw the ruins and realized what had happened to their families, they wept until they could weep no more. They were in deep sorrow and agony. David's wives were also among those that were captured. And David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. Why though? What did David do wrong? I don't know. Why were they talking about stoning David? What did he do wrong in this instance? Ah, was it? I don't know. I don't know why they were so upset with him. Sometimes when things happen, we lose all sense of reasoning and we're just reacting in the moment, and there's really no logic to that reaction, or there's no reason to it. Yeah, so I'm really trying to figure out why they were upset with David. Were they upset like it was because he led them to go on this failed mission to go fight with the Philistines, or what was it? I don't know. Anyways, so David was now in great danger because all his men were very bitter about losing their sons and daughters, and they began to talk of stoning him. But David found strength in the Lord his God. We must learn to find strength in God in difficult situations, in times of distress. Those situations want to push us away, and there's a tendency for us to focus on that situation and be sad and be depressed and say, what, God, why have you forsaken me? Why did you let this happen? I trusted in you. I prayed before I left. I've been praying and covering my family, and I, why would this happen to me? What's the point of serving you? I've done blah blah blah. We could go on and on. But David found strength in God. And then in verse 7, it said to Abiathar the priest, "Bring me the ephod." So Abiathar brought it. Then David asked the Lord, "Should I chase after this band of raiders? Will I catch them?" And the Lord told him, "Yes, go after them. You will surely recover everything that was taken from you." So David sought God, even in his distress. He could have um, launched out in anger and gone against them in anger, just the sheer fury of I just not even pausing to think, and just run after the enemy and just chase them down and try to recover whatever was stolen. But he took the time to seek God first, like he had always done in previous battles, seeking the face of God. He understood that's where his power lay. Like, if God does not go with me, I cannot defeat the enemy. I need God to go with me. I need God to guide me. I need God to lead me and tell me what's ahead. So David, armed with that information, armed with that knowledge, then launched out. But he wouldn't move without getting clear direction from God. And then in verse 11, along the way, they found an Egyptian man in a field and brought him to David. They gave him some bread to eat and water to drink. They also gave him part of a fig cake and 2 raisins, for he had not eaten anything for 3 days and nights. And then his strength returned. "To whom do you belong and where do you come from?" David asked him. "I'm an Egyptian, the slave of an Amalekite," he replied. "My master abandoned me 3 days ago because I was sick. We were on our way back from raiding the Kerethites in the Negev, the territory of Judah and the land of Caleb, and we have just burned down Ziklag, which was David's home, David's city. Will you lead me to this band of raiders?" David asked. The young man replied, "If you take an oath in God's name that you will not kill me or give me back to my master, then I'll guide you to them." This man's master had left him to die because he was sick. He abandoned him to die because he was sick. And that became the loophole that David and his men were able to use to get in to them. We must take care of the people in our lives, people who work for us, who work with us. Yeah, that's what I learned from that. A man's unkindness to his staff led to his downfall. Don't give the enemy an inroad. Treat people well, not as commodities to be used and disposed. People are not commodities to be used and disposed. Love others as we love ourselves. So he led David to them, and they found the Amalekites spread out across the fields. This is verse 16. Eating and drinking and dancing with joy because of the vast amount of plunder they had taken from the Philistines and the land of Judah. So these guys had raided, different lands in the area. David and his men rushed in among them and slaughtered them throughout that night and the entire next day until evening. None of the Amalekites escaped except 400 young men who fled on camels. David got back everything the Amalekites had taken, and he rescued his two wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, nor anything else that had been taken. David brought every single thing back. Isn't that amazing? If a few hours before or a few days before, David and his men were downcast and depressed, and they had lost everything. Their town was burned down. Their children and possessions were all gone. Like, where were they supposed to start from? Where were they going to start getting married again, bearing more children, acquiring new properties? Like, everything was gone. Their entire life was gone. And that's why they were upset and were going to stone David, because he was their leader. And, and see how that all turned around. Because David sought God, he got direction from God. And God went ahead of them and defeated the enemies before them. And they recovered everything, every single thing. Nothing was missing. David got back everything that had been taken, and he rescued his wives. Nothing was missing, small or great, son or daughter, no anything else that had been taken. David brought everything back. It is possible to recover all. I don't know what you've lost, what the enemy has stolen from you. Yes, you've lost relationships. You've lost opportunities. You've lost years. You've lost time. You've lost your health. You've lost wealth, resources. God is able to restore everything that we've lost. And I just want us to, just go to God in prayer right now and trust Him for restoration. Lord, restore everything. Restore, oh God, everything I've lost due to ignorance, carelessness, pride, unforgiveness, dishonor, laziness, lack of wisdom, whatever the enemy has stolen. I recover all in Jesus' mighty name. Amen. He also recovered all the flocks and herds, and his men drove them ahead. Then in 21, David returned to the brook Besor and met up with the 200 men who had been left behind because they were too exhausted to go with them. They went out to meet David and his men, and David greeted them joyfully. But some evil troublemakers among David's men, there's always some of those, they didn't go with us, so they can't have any of the plunder we recovered. Give them their wives and children and tell them to be gone. What? Oh my God. Yeah, these guys were mean. Like, wow, not nice. Just give them their wives and children and let them be gone. But they're not going to get any of the plunder because they didn't go out to fight with us. But David said, no, my brothers, don't be selfish with what the Lord has given us. He has kept us safe and helped us defeat the band of raiders that attacked us. Who will listen when you talk like this? We share and share alike. Those who go to battle and those who guard the equipment. From then on, David made this a decree and regulation for Israel, and it is followed today. Yeah, we must be careful not to allow division in our midst. Everyone has a role to play. Don't despise anyone's role or think one role is superior to the other. So David reminded them that it was the Lord who had helped them. They had not won that battle by their own power or might. It was by the grace of God. It was God who kept them safe and delivered the enemy into their hands. In verse 26, when he arrived at Ziklag, David sent part of the plunder to the elders of Judah, who were his friends. Here is a present for you, taken from the Lord's enemies, he said. David was a very wise man. And one thing to learn from this, what he did is, making friends with money, being a blessing to people. When you have money, make friends. It's a time to make friends, because relationships are even greater currency than money. Relationships can buy much more than what money can buy. So it's a time to make friends, build relationships, build connections. When you're in power, when you have money, resources, that's the time to build connections, build relationships, because those are investments that will pay back in future. Even when your money is gone, or in instances where you don't even maybe have the money at the moment, those relationships you built over time would um will come in handy. Now for the final chapter in 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel chapter 31. Yeah, this one is a bit emotional, because in this story, Saul and his sons actually die in the battle. In verse 1, now the Philistines attacked Israel, and the men of Israel fled before them. Many were slaughtered on the slopes of Mount Gilboa. The Philistines closed in on Saul and his sons, and they killed 3 of his sons, Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. The fighting grew very fierce around Saul, and the Philistine archers caught up with him and wounded him severely. Saul groaned to his armor-bearer, take your sword and kill me before these pagan Philistines come to run through and taunt me and torture me. But his armor-bearer was afraid and would not do it, so Saul took his own sword and fell on it. When his armor-bearer realized that Saul was dead, he fell on his own sword and died beside the king. So Saul, his 3 sons, his armor-bearer, and his troops all died together that same day. Whew. This is really sad. Very, very sad. Such a sad ending to a man, to the life of a man that God had great plans for. This was a man God had handpicked and chosen to lead his people, to be king over his people. But he neglected God. He forsook God. He despised God. Our lives are in God's hands. We must not think we can live life on our own or be successful on our own. Yeah, this is a very sad story. It's a very, very sad ending. And it didn't have to be this way. So Saul and his sons and his armor bearer all died in that battle because of one man, because of Saul's disobedience. Because of one man. They didn't have to die. So we must also be careful who we are following, who is leading you. Because our lives, our prosperity, our destinies are also tied to the people we are following. We must be sure we follow the people God has placed on our path to follow, and not just make decisions. It's not a decision to be made flippantly, because our lives are dependent on those who we submit our lives to and we follow, and those who lead in us. Company matters. Verse 7, when the Israelites on the other side of the Jezreel Valley and beyond the Jordan saw that the Israelite army had fled and that Saul and his sons were dead, they abandoned their towns and fled. So the Philistines moved in and occupied their towns. You know that verse that says, strike the shepherd and the sheep will scatter. Yeah, this is exactly what happened. And once we abandon post, the enemy comes in. All the enemy had to do was to attack the shepherd, and the flock, the sheep scattered. And they had all access to take over. That reminds me that we have to pray for our leaders, pray for the people God has placed over our lives, pray for our pastors, pray for our presidents, leaders of our nations, pray for our husbands, pray for our bosses, pray for anyone God has placed over our lives, that they will not take the wrong steps. God will continue to protect and preserve them and keep them, because our lives are tied to them. Their decisions impact us a lot, a great deal. Yeah, that's a sobering story, a sad ending, and a very cautionary tale, right? Cautionary tale. So much to learn from Saul's life and how it ended. Yeah, it's been great reading 1 Samuel with you. I look forward to hearing from you. What else did you learn from this story? The last couple chapters we've been going through. I'll see you in the next video.